Welcome back to Kapowich on Real Estate. Tonight we have in the studio Sam Chuck, real estate attorney. Sam?
Great to be here, Pat.
One of our regular guests. Robert, your first visit here?
It is indeed. Thank you.
Robert Bailey from Santa Cruz, former president of the California Association of Realtors and chairman of the Multiple Listing Service. 3 years in a row?
3 years.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you were there during that period. This is tonight's show is, of course, about pocket listings, off-MLS listings, the East Coast whisper listings. In fact, for the lay people out there, Robert, can you describe what is the term pocket listing?
Okay. Pocket listings itself, taking it back in history a little bit, before we had an organized MLS, before you had any kind of structure to how we were going to disperse the information between us as agents and between us as companies, you literally carried your listings around in your pocket. So if you and I encountered each other, and I liked you and wanted to do business with you, I shared my listing with you.
Right.
If I didn't,
then you wouldn't.
I wouldn't. Some would say we've gone back to that now. But now the multiple listing is here. You've got this organized structure, which was a book at one point. Now it's all electronic and using the internet. And so what's happened is the term pocket listings is carried forward. Right. And I think you mentioned on the East Coast, they call it a whisper listing. Some will call it an off-the-market listings. Well, in reality, it's not in your pocket. You're not whispering about it, and it's not off the market.
Right.
It's being fully exposed through the internet, through your personal advertising, through print media, through your real estate company. It's just being withheld from the MLS, and therefore not being exposed to the other 15,000 plus subscribers, 15,000 plus agents in our 5-county market.
Okay, so for the lay people, a listing is a piece of real estate for sale that's listed on the multiple listing service.
Correct. Well, the listing would be where I've been retained as a broker, where Bailey Properties has been retained to market that property for you. So we have a listing agreement that you've signed in authorizing us to market your property.
Right, which is almost an employment agreement.
In essence, yes.
Yeah. Now, can you describe for the people in the audience a multiple listing service, MLS? How does that operate?
Well, an MLS at its roots is a cooperative. It's an offer of cooperation and compensation within the real estate community. So we're going to cooperate with each other in exposing our listings to each other, helping each other show those listings, and negotiating hopefully a transaction to the benefit of the seller. And there lies the offer of compensation. So there's a structure for an offer of compensation between two different real estate companies or two different agents, the division of the commission that's being paid by the seller.
Okay. So now, Sam, we're taking that concept and now we are going to the real estate community. For instance, half the real estate community, let's say, is from independent brokerages, and the other half is from big offices that might have 1,000 agents or 2,000 agents. Now, when a large office sells their own listing, that has been referred to as dual agency. Can you speak about dual agency? How does that play out?
Well, dual agency is kind of funny because it is accepted by the legal system as being allowed.
Right.
Although the old adage, you can't serve two kings, same is the dilemma facing a real estate agent. But a real estate agent can, in fact, or a real estate broker can, in fact, represent both the buyer and the seller. So a dual agent means they're representing dual parties. They're representing the buyer and the seller, both sides of the deal. Right. The thing to keep in mind as to what is a dual agent is they use the term dual agent, but it's not the agent, it's really the broker. Because the way California real estate works is there's lots of people with salesperson's licenses, and those are often called agents, but they have to work for a broker. And the broker is the person who holds the license in the state of California that's allowed to be in this business of selling real estate for people. Right. So when you talk about a dual agent, you're really talking about a broker who works for both parties. So what does it mean for a broker? Well, a broker can have multiple agents working under their license. Let's say I was a broker. Right. I could have 100 agents, 200 agents, 1,000. Right. A lot of the local big brokerages have multiple offices, and they're all working under one broker's license. Right. So if that broker's license is up here, and there's 17 offices operating under that license, all of them work for the same broker. So if an agent in the South San Jose office is doing a deal with an agent in the Palo Alto office, all under the same broker, that's dual agency.
Excellent.
So why is that important? Because an agent has a fiduciary duty. They have a duty that's the same as if you're a trustee or a guardian. They're supposed to take care of you. Real estate agent's supposed to look out for your interest. Well, if I'm representing the buyer and I'm representing the seller, even if it's two different people in two different offices, my legal duties are the same. I have a fiduciary duty to both. I have to take care of both of them. Well, you can imagine if I've got to take care of both of them, I'm in a predicament. And it doesn't get solved by saying, well, it's Pat out of Palo Alto and Sam out of South San Jose. That doesn't solve the problem. It's the broker, the individual at the top, who has that dilemma in fulfilling those duties. And so dual agency really heightens the bar of the obligations of the agent to make sure they're A, fulfilling all their duties to their client, but when they got two clients, that's hard to do.
Okay, now that's probably the best description of dual agency we've ever had on this show after 200-something shows. But maybe it's because Abigail is now our new stage manager. I don't know, maybe we're raising our game here, but you have had a lot of agents under your charge for many years. And I know when I 3 times in 25 years I've represented a buyer and a seller in the same transaction. It's typically a down market. And it seemed to me it was 3 times the work, 4 times the responsibility, and 5 times the liability. Right? So it's a little difficult as an agent in the field.
I think Sam described it extremely well. I think it's certainly a concern, a heightened concern when you have the same individual representing both the buyer and the seller, because your role at that point really changes. You become an ombudsman, you become a mediator, you become a guide, because it's really hard to sit down and say, I am, quote, the advocate of. And yet, at the same time, being that agent entails more than just price. It entails more than just the length of an escrow. There's a lot of different nuances within a transaction, and I think sometimes we get caught up on simply the concept of price as being the only thing that one is negotiating. There's a lot of other factors that come into play from what Sam was describing. So it's a difficult bridge to cross as an individual agent.
Okay, so that's and I'm leading into this, I'm going full circle here. When we do a pocket listing, now we have the issue of not putting it on the multiple listing service, not putting it on the internet, not doing newspaper ads, the broker tour on a weekday morning and open houses Saturday, Sunday. If we did that traditional marketing, we would probably sell it to an agent or a buyer who has an agent outside our firm, and we might have more than one offer, right? So can you speak how a listing that's on the ML on the market, on multiple listing service versus off, the marketing differences, how that plays out, and the advantages for a seller?
Well, I think, Pat, what you've described there is this whole bundle of marketing services that an agent's going to offer. And I would say that even with agents that are keeping their properties off the MLS, they're still doing most of the others. They're still holding an open house. There may be a personal property website.
That's true.
Many are running ads in the newspaper. What the hole in the donut, so to speak, is that offer of cooperation with the other agents, the largest cluster of other agents in the marketplace. And whether I'm selling a house or I'm selling a widget, if I want to maximize the return for my client, I'm going to maximize the exposure, and that involves bringing the other 15,000 members of the MLS into the equation, because I don't know if one of you is representing the perfect buyer for my listing without exposing it to a network that you belong to. And that would be the multiple listing service. Now, so the net result from a statistical standpoint, which is where I think you're going with that question, is that the multiple MLS listings has put a tremendous amount of their resources into analyzing the whole issue of the off-MLS and comparing public tax records, transfer records with MLS records, scrubbing it for duplication, making sure that they're looking at just arm's length transactions. The net result of that analysis was that you're seeing a growing differential in price between properties that are marketed off the MLS versus properties that are marketed and sold through the MLS. And 3 years ago, that was an average of $55,000 in difference between the median home price for a property market off the MLS versus on. 2 years ago, that grew to about 95,000. Last year, that sat at 105,000. In the first quarter of this year, we're seeing a differential of almost $113,000 between the median home price of a home sold on the MLS versus homes sold off the MLS. And so there's a value to that network. There's a value to that offer of cooperation with your peers.
Okay.
And the benefactor is the seller.
Okay, now that, Sam, you had a seminar earlier in the year at Santa Clara County Association of Realtors, a packed house, and it was on dual agency, if I recall, and the hazards for agent to be involved in dual agency. Now we have this situation here that Robert just explained with a pocket listing. Now we're going to merge the pocket listing and dual agency, two landmine issues for the real estate licensee. And of course, the sellers are getting the short end of the deal here.
Well, you know, if you look at it this way, start with just the foundation of what a real estate agent has to do in representing a seller. Your job is to get them a qualified buyer in the highest price. Oversimplified. There's a lot of duties along the way, but that's your goal. If like Robert said, if you put it out on the MLS, you got a higher group of, or a larger group of audience who can buy. Right now we're in a hot market, a lot of multiple offer scenarios, bidding wars going up. Well, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out the more people I have bidding, the more people I have looking at it, the higher the price goes. So now I represent the seller. What's my goal? My goal is get the highest price.
Right.
Well, if I cut out a segment, if I take them off the MLS, if I take a group and say you're excluded from the bidding, I'm not serving my clients' good interests.
Correct.
Now compound that, dual agency. In dual agency, we forgot to mention one thing. Why do people want to be a dual agent? You'd think with all the extra exposure, all the extra work, why? Increased commission. Remember, in a typical transaction, the brokers are getting 5 to 6% of the deal, okay? That's their typical fee. Often they split it. Let's just use 6% for this example. So the agent representing the seller gets 3%, and the agent representing the buyer gets 3%.
Agencies, the firm.
The agencies, right.
Yeah.
So let's assume it's just one brokerage. Let's assume it's one person. They get 6%. Well, there's a financial attraction to being a dual agent.
Right.
You're getting both sides of the deal.
Right.
So now put that at the same time that you're trying to serve two people's interests, okay? What does the buyer want? The buyer wants the best house for the lowest price, right? Not rocket science there either.
Sure.
So now you have to deal with this conflict as a real estate agent. The law allows it and you can achieve it, but you need to understand those benchmarks. So when you talk about MLS, you are talking about a foundational obligation to the seller to try to broaden the marketing. What happens if you, as representing the seller, decide, I'm going to omit the MLS, I'm going to omit that audience? Well, you can do it. There's a lot of reasons to do it. Maybe they don't want that much exposure for the house. They don't want it all over the internet. They don't want pictures of their home everywhere. They're sophisticated sellers. They're just individuals who say, look, I understand my privacy rights. I understand what this means. I don't want the hassle. Real estate agent, I understand. You fully inform me. There's forms for them to fill out and initial, and it doesn't go on MLS. As long as that agent is fulfilling those obligations, explaining it to the seller and saying, you know, here's all your risks and so forth, then it's all good. But like Robert was just saying, averages show they're going to get a lower price. Not every time, but often they do. So what does that mean to a seller down the road? If you're a dual agent, what's the seller going to say? In hindsight, at the time they tell you, I heard you, they tell you, Mr. Real Estate Agent, oh, believe me, I completely understand. But when the neighbor next door sells for a lesser home for $100,000 more, all of a sudden they don't understand so well, and they're going to think, dual agent, why did you do this to me? And guess what they're going to say in response? What is that person's attorney going to say first thing out of the box? You wanted both commissions.
Okay.
You were a dual agent, and you pocket listed, you kept it off the MLS, whatever you want to say, but you didn't look out for my seller's interest. So that's why dual agency, which is hard to fulfill but doable, and off MLS, which is omitting a part of the market, is a tough thing to blend together for an agent while protecting themselves. So you got to, agents can do it, but there's reasons, there's whole forms generated with initials and everything else, because the seller really needs to understand that.
Now, Robert spoke at the National Association of Realtors, and you joked about that privacy issue, how privacy wasn't such a concern during the Great Recession. All of a sudden, the flood of listings receded and it became a buyer's market. All of a sudden, supposedly, these agents that are engaged in this are claiming privacy.
Well, I think that historically speaking, the two biggest reasons given for keeping a property off the MLS, why you as a seller decided to ask your agent to keep your property off the MLS, it dealt with your privacy and your security. Whether I'm somebody notable or I covet my privacy, I've got my white Berber carpets, whatever it may be, I was very concerned about those issues, the privacy and security. During the housing recession, we saw numbers of off-MLS marketing between 6, 7, 8%. Well, as the market started to get better, we started to see an increase in the off-MLS activity. And that's when MLS listings, at the request of many of their members, started to analyze the issue and kind of take a look at the trends. Was this market driven? And to your point, what I joked about is the fact that obviously people's concern about privacy and security went up as the market got better, because they weren't nearly as concerned about their privacy and security when it was a buyer's market and they needed somebody to come look at their house.
And then agents sitting at the kitchen table, they oftentimes are the authority, and the sellers look to them and say, what should I do? And so they could really drive the boat. And I've been joking about this, is that during the Great Recession, Sam, the agents are saying, okay, we need to clean up the property, we need you to take your dog to your cousin's while we're selling it, and we need to do a broker tour this Thursday, and we're going to have open house Saturday and Sunday. So let's all work together and get this ready. And then later, the same agent could have, during the great, as the market became a buyer's market, that the listing agent sitting at the kitchen table says, you don't want a bunch of looky-loos coming through your house, do you? I mean, the price is right here. I could get you that price in a matter of days, not have anyone come through, no inspections, no nothing.
Oh, it's happening all the time.
It's happening all the time.
And
so
that's where the agent is walking into a possible
trap.
lawsuit.
Right.
Because the problem for the agent is, and let's assume the best intentions. I'm an agent, I come up to you, I think your house is worth $1 million. I say, you know what, Pat, your house is worth $1 million. I think I can get it. I've got this buyer, they're crazy, they've outbid on every home.
Exactly.
They'll pay you $1.05 million. They're gonna pay you over, Pat. I can make it easy for you. You don't have anybody traipsing through your house, no open houses. We can coordinate when you want to move. I can make all your dreams come true. And there's a lot of sellers who hear that and understandably say, perfect, great. And it doesn't mean that anyone had an ill intent in that whole thing. I'm not saying the broker was trying to manipulate them or anything. Really thought they were doing a service for them. But because they didn't put it out to the market, to the MLS or to the market entirely, maybe there was people lined up to go $1.1 million, $1.15 million, $1.2 million. You don't know unless you get the exposure.
Okay.
And so it creates a problem for the agent, because even the best intentions by the agent may land that agent in a lawsuit later if it turns out, hindsight is always 20/20, the house next door sells for $100 grand or $200 grand more. All of a sudden, why didn't you expose me? Why'd you tell me to take this guy?
Okay, now that's a good point for the agents that are ethical and perhaps they made a poor choice, or unethical. And that's a common problem in American business. Just because it's legal doesn't make it ethical, right? So let me, you had mentioned, when you spoke at the California Association, or the National Association of Realtors last fall, you were on this topic, and there was a attorney from California Association of Realtors, Elizabeth, and she mentioned that putting a listing on the multiple listing service is a great risk management tool for the agency.
Well, I think it naturally be true. I mean, if part of fulfilling my fiduciary obligation to you as a seller is to make sure that I've given you the broadest exposure, that I've maximized maximize the opportunity to bring in a qualified buyer, the multiple listing service is not just a safe harbor, but an extremely wise choice, because there is no larger aggregated database of agents that may have the buyer looking for your property. I mean, Sam used the example of the property not going on the MLS and the agent themselves bringing in a buyer. It's important to note that though we've seen a dramatic spike in the number of properties, the percentage of properties starting their marketing off the MLS, we have not seen the corresponding spike in dual agency. It's certainly not by a single agency, but agent themselves. And so we have to be careful not to tether those two issues too tightly together, because they're not moving at the same pace. They're not climbing at the same pace. But by getting that property on the MLS, you're doing more than testing the marketplace, which is also what you'll hear conversations about. We're going to test the market within the network. We're going to get some agents through and get an opinion and value. Well, the greatest place to get that opinion and value is the multiple listing service itself, and you can do that as an agent, Pat, without exposing it to the internet, without putting 30 photos out there that are unretrievable. You can put it on the MLS and dictate as a broker at the seller's request that this is not going to go to any other broker's website, not even my own website at Bailey Properties. It's not going to go out on the internet and be sent out to one of the major portals.
Right.
And so you can restrict that data to those 15,000 agents out there who may have that qualified buyer. So that creates your safe harbor.
No, so that's like a menu. You can have a lockbox, no lockbox. You can have one picture. You can have 20 pictures. You can have 85 websites or no websites.
No websites.
You can tailor it. But you made a good point about this dual agency is what I'm warning the agents that are watching the show, as well as the sellers, that's a red flag. Now, perhaps they have a friend across town, or they're a member of a group that meets every Thursday. And we have these people at real estate communities or the meetings, they say have wants and needs, and say, I have a buyer that wants a 4-bedroom house with Brown and Coffin with the such and such school district. So they know that person, and we could do a sale off the MLS. Very similar situation. But you had shepherded the MLS during these years. I just want to run the numbers by you on this. I got this here from MLS listings here in Santa Clara. In 2011, almost 12% sales spike off MLS. 2012, almost 15%. 2013, almost 21%. And the first quarter of this year, 2014, almost 20%. Okay. Now, in terms of the numbers, we have in 2011 $2.5 billion in sales.
That took place off the MLS.
Off the MLS. 2012, $3.4 billion. 2013, 4.8, and the first quarter, almost $1 billion off the MLS. Now, why that's important, I know that you shepherded this, said, well, let's go over, by the way, let's describe again how you gleaned the information. On MLS, these are sales, they go to the county.
Yeah, the basis for information, obviously, is the MLS itself. Excuse me, the closed transactions through the multiple listing service. We compared that with public tax records and other transfers, scrubbing that data then for interfamily transfers, a trust sale, a foreclosure, so that we tried to achieve with some accuracy having numbers that reflected arm's length transactions that took place within the multiple listing service as compared to those that took place outside the multiple listing service.
Now, let me run this by Sam. We have here the stats. So if you're an attorney, you know, we've interviewed you many times over the years, and you had always mentioned, we got a couple minutes left here, that whenever there's an issue in real estate, the fallout is a year or 2 or 3 down the road, right?
Right.
Real quick here, we've got 2 minutes here. In 2012, the delta between on MLS and off, the median was 64,000. Sellers having their property on them.
Right.
2013, $105,000 difference. So any words of wisdom here for the sellers and the agents out there in closing?
We haven't seen that litigation start up yet.
Right.
typically litigation in the residential arena hits biggest on a downturn. It's the old buyer's remorse, seller's remorse. When everybody's rolling in the dough, so to speak, you don't see a lot of litigation. People don't want to spend money on lawyers. I don't fault them.
Right.
When they start to feel like they lost something and every dime counts, that's when you see that type of litigation. So, and it does take a couple of years to get in the pipeline. But as people start to realize more and more that by being off MLS, it costs them money, the more you're going to see that litigation. And that's when it'll escalate. And you know, these kind of stats will bolster and support those types of claims.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sam. Robert Bailey, thank you for all you've done for the real estate community. Thank you especially for shepherding the MLSlistings.com here in the last few years.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me
Okay,
today.
you bet. I can't think of a better guest to end our show with. Thanks again for watching, and this is, we have a new stage manager, Abigail Chuck. I can hear it now. The Honorable Senator Abigail Chuck.
From your lips to God's ears.
There you go. Thanks again for watching.